All right, so obviously, I think by now everybody knows that I'm from New York, specifically New York City. The center of the world is where I live, not where you live. So with that being said, I wanted to take you through one of my favorite buildings in Midtown Manhattan, Grand Central Terminal. It's a train station for those of you who are not familiar with it. A misconception is the fact that most people call it Grand Central Station. Grand Central Station is actually the post office adjacent to Grand Central Terminal on Lexington Avenue. So it is Grand Central Terminal. The trains do run through there, and it is one of the largest tourist attractions in the city of New York. There are plenty of people who have added to the history of Grand Central Station. Obviously, the Vanderbilt family is the family that owned it. They're the ones that founded it. Cornelius Vanderbilt was a pioneer in the railroad industry. Taking a step back, the way that Grand Central connects to the rest of the state and Connecticut is through three rail lines: the New Haven, the Hudson Line, and the Harlem Line. So those three railroads branch out up into upstate New York and into Connecticut, and they bring rail passengers into the city. At the time, each one of those rails were owned by independent agencies, independent people, financiers. Cornelius Vanderbilt was the president of two of them. He was not the owner of it. He ended up being elected president, and then he got out of that, and then he ended up buying the Harlem Line. And from the Harlem Line, he ended up building, at the time, what was Grand Central Depot. And that was the start of what we now know as Grand Central Terminal. And he ended up leasing space in Grand Central Terminal to the rest of the trains as they are train tracks, train stations, independent agencies coming into the city. So ultimately, it was bought by a developer years and years later, and it was owned by a separate conglomerate that was not the Metro Transit Authority. Now, the Metro Transit Authority is what you hear about all the time. New York City subways collapsing, crumbling. The Metro Transit Authority is the one that owns all of that. So he was the one that started it. His vision for it was a place for people to come and enter a palace on the end of their ride and not a shed. And if anybody's ever been in Grand Central Terminal, it is certainly not a shed. So I think that these words now he would be very happy with to see the final product. The other person that is credited with saving the history of Grand Central Terminal years later was Jackie Kennedy. After President Kennedy died and after she moved out of Washington, D.C., she did move to New York. Her grandfather was a big real estate developer in the city of New York. She ended up doing everything in New York, to keep his memory alive. And so in 1974, there was the landmark preservation status of Grand Central Terminal was stripped, and they wanted to build an office building over it. And she actually wrote to the mayor at the time, Mayor Beam, and led the opposition to stripping that historic preservation, stopping the construction of the apartment building, office building over it, and saving Grand Central for what it is today. And actually, in the presentation in a little bit, you'll see an Oyster Bar, which is a restaurant. She held the press conference calling for the saving of Grand Central Terminal outside of that historic restaurant. So this is what Grand Central Terminal looks like, from the sky. This is 42nd Street, which most people are probably familiar with. This is Park Avenue. This is Vanderbilt. And it does sit right on 42nd Street between Park and Lexington. And this is the main entrance of Grand Central Terminal. This right here, this is a bridge. It actually is a pedestrian bridge, and it is a taxi bridge. And there is a road up here that takes people to Park Avenue on the other side of Grand Central, which used to be 4th Avenue. And so this is just the corner, probably one of the most photoed corners in the city of New York. I do want to mention this is the Hyatt Hotel, the Grand Hyatt Hotel here. This used to be the Commodore Hotel. President Trump at one point did own it. He did put the whole building in glass. This building right here no longer exists. They're building Vanderbilt. One Vanderbilt is the name of the new building. It's a 100% building trades job, and it's the largest residential and residential commercial mixed-use building going up in the city in its modern history. If you go up there now, it's about halfway done. This is looking at it from the other side. This is Pershing Square. This building no longer is there, as I had just mentioned. Notice the train windows. I just want to draw your attention to up here. Obviously, taxi cabs line up here all the time. As soon as you come out of Grand Central Terminal, there's always a taxi cab to take you wherever you want. A couple things about New York City. New York City is home to 8.6 million residents. Grand Central Terminal, is not the largest train station in the world. It is third. First, Penn Station on the other side of town is the first one. Toronto train station up in Canada is the second. Grand Central is the third. It's got the most passengers, second to Penn Station, obviously, in New York City. So this right here, this is probably one of the most pictured pieces of building artwork that you'll see in the city of New York. This right here is actually owned by Tiffany, and it's the largest clock that Tiffany has in its collection. It spans 13 feet wide. And when it was restored about 12 years ago, and what happened was they took each piece out individually, and there's stairs behind here, and they took each piece out, they sent it out, they refurbished it, and they put it back in. So it did take 12 years, and there are little steps behind there, and each piece was carried out one by one to protect its delicacy. Like I said, it is the largest Tiffany clock in the world. All the clocks in Grand Central, this one included, is actually controlled by the Naval Observatory in Maryland. It is an atomic clock, so it always has the precise time, as is the other clock that we'll discuss in a second. These right here, these are sculpted gods, and they're said to represent the railroad via strength, speed, and intellect. They do call it the transportation sculpture. This, if you take a look back here, these windows are now what you're looking up close up. These were there are 9 of these throughout the east, west, and south side of the building. They acted as the original air conditioning units. They are double pane windows, and there is a space between each of the panes, and they would open them up, and the way that the wind would blow through the city, it would actually cool Grand Central in the middle of the summer. The reason it's 2 pane is, and you could see right here, that they are walkways. They do connect the buildings. They do connect the entire building together. There are offices on the sides of the building, the one side of the building that does not have windows. So this was the main mode of getting around. So you did not have to go through the main terminal, which always had 1 million people in it. So now we're going to go into the main concourse. Has anybody ever been to Grand Central? I'm sure there are a few people that have. So this is the definition of a New York minute. You go in there, people are flying by you. There's always 1 million things going on. People are trying to steal your stuff. People are trying to, push you out of the way. I mean, it really is like no place you've ever been. A couple things that I want to draw your attention to here. This entrance right here, this is how you enter the MetLife building. It's also known as the Hainsley building in the city, and it is the headquarters for MetLife, which is an insurance company. You come down here, you've got this information building, which we'll touch on. People come in here all the time. There's proposals, there's pictures, there's wedding photos, anything you can name happens in there. People sit in there all day and watch. Homeless people live there. I mean, it's just, it's just chaos. Take a notice of the ceiling. There's some pictures coming up as well. Right here, I would say, oops, sorry. There are 780,000 people come through Grand Central every single day. That includes tourists, that includes people that come in just for lunch. 780,000 people, that's the population of San Francisco. Just to give you guys some, relative terms here. It's extraordinary. Flanked on both sides are 2 staircases. Now the one on the east side is the original staircase. It was built back in 1913. The one on the west side was built in 1990, and it's actually 1 inch shorter than the one on the east side. And a lot of people think they were built together, but that's just not true. And the person who came in later to put those stairs in did that on purpose so that the rest of history would know they were not built at the same time. It was an addition. At the top of each side, you have Michael Jordan Steakhouse, and you have Apple. The Apple in Grand Central Station is the largest one in the Northern Hemisphere. It takes from here over, around, and over here. And when you go in there, it's just rows and rows and rows of computer and Apple products. So it is pretty big. The ceiling here. This is the ceiling of the main concourse. This flag was installed directly after 9/11, and it's been there ever since. The ceiling is actually a representation of the Mediterranean sky during the October to March zodiac, and it depicts 2,500 stars. It's actually reverse. So the story is that and I guess, one of those anecdotal stories that got passed down, which isn't necessarily true, is it is backwards. If you look up, it is flipped upside down. And a lot of people had said that was done on purpose because that's how God sees the sky. But that's not true. The painter actually had the document that he was painting from on the wrong side of the floor. So, that has, I guess the historians did whatever they had to do to find that. But it was not done on purpose. It was an accident. It was redone back in 1990, and because it is a train station, because diesel trains do run in there, and there used to be coal trains in there, the entire ceiling used to be black. It used to be covered in this soot, and you could never see this. In 1990, they actually cleaned it up, and this is what the old ceiling used to look like. So you could see the restoration process that took place. It used to be black like this. And people do come in all the time and they take pictures of the sky. It is the zodiac. In the face, let's see, where is it? The face of the bull right here, you'll actually see, and if I could zoom in, I would, but I couldn't find a good picture. There are stars and there are messages written in the face of the bull. And that was done by the artists at the time, one of the many 50 artists that it took to finish this. They actually wrote love notes. A lot of them got married during the time they were painting it. They wrote their wife's name or their husband's name in it. If they had a baby at the time, they wrote their baby's name in it. So there is actually a lot of different inscriptions in there that you're not going to be able to see. So yeah, this still is there. It's right over Michael Jordan Steakhouse. You could see it. A lot of people are always getting pointed. It's always getting pointed out to people, and it just shows you how dirty the ceiling was before they cleaned it. So this is the information center. They answer 1,000 questions an hour at that information center. And I don't know who's asking these questions, because the people that sit there are not friendly. They're the nastiest people in the world. So I don't know who's getting these answers or what they're asking, but it's not pleasant. There is a staircase underneath here that does allow the information desk to go downstairs to the dining concourse. But they do have paper, as you can see here, they do have paper station guides and paper train station service guides and everything like that. So this clock it was recently estimated by Sotheby's, and it's worth about $11 million. The 4 faces are opal. So, and again, that is controlled by the Naval Observatory down in Maryland. One of the things that you can see up here, this picture is hard to see, but you can see right here are the acorns and the leaves. That was the family shield of the Vanderbilt family. It was their family logo and insignia. So everywhere in Grand Central you see the acorns and the leaves, and that obviously was a touch that the Vanderbilts put on it. It is all Beau artwork, and at the time, Cornelius Vanderbilt's niece was the one who designed it. So you'll see throughout a lot of the Grand Central's artwork that it does have all of these leaves and acorns. The other thing that I want to mention, this is a close-up of the clock. Again, you could sort of see the leaves and everything there. You'll see the window panes again. The train board. Now this is interesting. All of these the train boards, when you walk into Grand Central, you've got the main concourse, you've got the opening like this, and you've got train boards up here. And you'll see the Hudson line, there's one for the Harlem line, and the New Haven line. These times are never correct. They're always 1 minute off. The train always leaves 1 minute later than the train time posted. And that gives passengers an opportunity to get from the center of Grand Central to the train tracks. And they do that on purpose so that it's not, you're not killing each other to get there. And most people don't know that, because the people that do know it will take advantage of that 1 minute, and the people that don't will get there half an hour early. So it kind of balances out. Grand Central Market, this is flanked on either side of the train terminal are various shops. The Grand Central Market is the one. They have 160 types of seafood, 400 types of cheese and meats, various other breads. All of the food that is served here is sourced locally. Comes from Connecticut, New York, Pennsylvania. So it's pretty good. It's very expensive though. Vanderbilt Hall here, when you first walk in, this used to be the train waiting area, and if you ever go in there, you'll see where the benches used to be based on the wear and tear of the floor, and you'll actually see grooves in the granite and the marble of where people used to stand and where they used to sit and drop their bags. There are actually ruts there. Right now it's used as catering. It is the namesake. Vanderbilt obviously is the namesake of Cornelius Vanderbilt. Actually, Gloria Vanderbilt still, who's one of the living heirs of the Vanderbilt family, still actually has ties and still has equity share in the part of this that they didn't sell. I don't know if those of you, side information, Gloria Vanderbilt's son is Anderson Cooper on CNN. Anderson Cooper is a Vanderbilt, so I'm not sure if anybody knew that. The Campbell apartment. There's a lot of misconceptions here about the Campbell apartment. John Campbell was a big financier in New York City real estate market. A lot of people believe that he used to live here. He'd never lived here. This was just an office that he had. Since this was years ago, he is now dead, and this is now owned by a real estate company, and it's actually a bar. And you can go drink at the top of Grand Central. Drinks are about $21, and the rent here is $1.1 million a month, just to give you a sense of how much they're paying for this. So no wonder why drinks are $21 a month. I had mentioned to you before about Jackie Kennedy's press conference with Mayor, or to support or to have Mayor Beam support keeping Grand Central as a national landmark so they couldn't do the rebuilding project. She held her press conference right here in front of the Oyster Bar. The Oyster Bar is the oldest business, the longest standing business in Grand Central Terminal. They offer about 140 different oysters on every day, and it first opened the door the same year that the terminal opened in 1913. One of the things that I love about this is the Guastavino tile. It is signature to Grand Central. If you see it, it's this long sort of subway tile. A lot of people actually use that same tile, to inspire their kitchen backsplashes now. They call it subway tile, but it is Guastavino tile. This is the inside. So the whole roof in the Oyster Bar is that Guastavino tile. It's beautiful. The Whispering Arch here, which is actually the foyer to the Oyster Bar, you'll see it is a curved ceiling. And people do stand in either sections of the curved ceiling, and you can whisper to each other. And actually, the way that the ceiling is curved with the bounce of the tile, your voice actually travels, and the person standing with their back to you on the other side can actually hear everything you're saying. A lot of proposals happen here. Every time you walk through Grand Central, somebody's getting married, somebody's getting divorced. There's always a million things going on. So this is where some of it happens. So the dining on the lower level, 10,000 people enter Grand Central every single day just to eat lunch. The whole second floor of Grand Central Terminal is all of a dining concourse. They have things down there to the likes of Shake Shack, pizza, there's tacos, all different types of things. Actually, one of the things that I wanted to mention here is on the very corner in the back of the dining concourse is the Lost and Found. About 12,000 things every week get lost on Grand Central trains. They have an 80% recovery rate for people that lose things. It's the most successful lost and found return in the world. 80% of the things lost on Grand Central get returned to the people. And that's to the tune of 12,000 objects a day. So that's crazy. It's insanity. The Annex tennis courts, not many people know that they're here. There are public tennis courts off the Campbell apartment in Grand Central. Donald Trump most famously owned it for a short period of time before the MTA bought it back, and he hosted the likes of Billie Jean King and Serena Williams and Venus Williams playing on that tennis court. It was restored by a Hungarian tennis player. And ever since then, it was in 2008, the MTA actually ended up buying the rights back to Grand Central for $35 million. And as a result, it is now the property of the MTA. So this is what a typical Metro North train platform looks like. You've got obviously the trains, and they go in and out of the city. Track 61. This is called the Waldorf Astoria track. Now, has anybody ever been to the Waldorf? It's the most famous, it's probably the most successful and the most famous hotel in New York City. It's been closed for the last 5 years. Chinese developers actually bought the property from the Waldorf Astoria Development Corporation, and they're redoing it to open it up at a later date. But this used to be the private track that used to take the rich people who stayed at the Waldorf to and from Grand Central. It was a private track. This one is obviously just for photo and tour purposes, but if you see this track over here, it's not operational every day, but it is still operational when the President of the United States comes to town, and they do take the President across the city underground a lot of time to avoid the traffic on the upper level. Most recently, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt, it was used pretty frequently when FDR was the president and he had polio, and he didn't want to be taken back and forth in public, so they would take him up and down. It is an express route. It does go right out of the city. In addition to being a Metro North commuter rail line, Grand Central is home to the 456, which is the subway that connects the east side of Manhattan to the rest of to Queens and to the Bronx. Last stop on the 456 in New York City is actually Brooklyn Bridge, City Hall, and then it goes right up into the Bronx and right into Brooklyn. And there's a branch that takes you to Queens as well. This is, again, the subway tile. Each subway station in New York, especially Grand Central, all has these hand-laid tiles, and the hand-laid tile, the mosaic tiles also always have the name of whatever subway station you're in. And then finally, what does the future look like? The East Side Access Project is actually undergoing right now, and what it does is it connects the Long Island Railroad, sort of eases the flow of traffic from Penn Station and pushes it to the east side of Manhattan, and it really just connects the LIRR in Long Island through Queens, and it will take you under the East River into Manhattan. It is still going on right now. Probably the next 5 years it will be done. It has, let's see, I can't remember how many. It's $11.1 billion. It's supposed to be completed in 2022. And it will just connect. It's going to be an 8-track terminal. So that's what the future looks like. Does anybody have any questions? That about wraps it up.
How much does it cost to ride the train? I guess it depends where you're going.
Yeah, it's about $24 one way, $24.50 one way. For a monthly pass, depending on how far down the line you're going.
That's for the whole line, correct?
For each, yeah. Well,
You're just going a few stops, right?
So are you talking about the Metro North, or are you talking about the subway? So the commuter rail, it really, depending on how far you go, but most of it is about $24.
And people pay that every day?
Yeah, it's about $325 for a monthly ticket.
They pay $21 for a gin and tonic.
Yeah. And then the subway's $2.75 a ride, no matter where you're going. Metro North, there is some variation to how far you're going, but not much. So.
What was that tile in the ceiling that was still black? Why? What was that one?
It's not a tile, it's just a building. The cleaning people actually left it there to show the contrast of what it was. It was. Yeah. Yeah, there's no tile or anything to it. It's just, it is the ceiling. They just left it there to show people how dirty it was. And again, it's right over the Michael Jordan Steakhouse, which is there. So.
Michael Jordan steak.
I've actually never eaten there. But
Do you travel there every day?
yeah. So I live on the west side of Manhattan, so I take the 2 subway to the shuttle, which drops you off in the basement of Grand Central. And then my office building is on 41st and 3rd, which is a block away from Grand Central.
So a couple years ago, they had a deal where somebody was texting and they had at the exact, like 11:20 in 10 seconds, all these people that were in there froze.
Flash dance.
Yeah.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Flash mob, yeah.
Yeah.
Flash mob, yeah. And I saw that, people just stopped. It was just, what do they do it for 60 seconds?
Yeah.
Whatever. But it was
There was an artist in there 2 years ago, and he actually was photographing naked people. Like, it was flooded with naked people in various poses, and he was taking photos from the Apple deck. So it was basically just a sea of naked people. They actually closed it early so that they could do that. The last train out of the city, is 1:50 at night. So if you're not on that last train, you're paying a nice hefty cab fee wherever you're going. So.